Personally, I make movies that I would like to see. I think I was first inspired to work in film or do something involved in film just by, a love of cinema from a very early age, which I think was instilled in me and my brother by our parents because they would talk a lot about film and they would take us to see films. So what I write and what I make is a film that I would like to see if I were an audience member. You sort of got to approach, and not everybody does this, but I have to approach it as like, if I hadn't made this, would this be one of my favorite films?
You guys are so amazing.
She seems nice.
Yeah.
Scott, if your life had a face, I would punch it.
Yeah. Wait, what?
When you think of films, your first thing you think of is like visuals because you're looking at something. But obviously, like sound and music is like equally important. I think back at the sort of the films that like had the most impact on me growing up, that had a huge element of that, where the sort of the use of sound and music is sometimes the whole show. Something like with Dolby Atmos, what it does is it forces you to think of ways that you could utilize it. The weird thing with Scott Pilgrim is that it didn't kind of like break through in a big way initially, but then very quickly became a cult item where suddenly it was like on the midnight circuit. So I think as the 10th anniversary loomed and like there's this kind of, what can we do? And like one of the things, having after Scott Pilgrim done like Dolby Atmos with like Baby Driver and Last Night in Soho, it's like, well, why don't we remaster Scott Pilgrim in Dolby Vision? In 4K, in like sort of Dolby Atmos. It has several sequences where people are literally having sonic battles. There's the scene with the bass off, there's the big set piece with like Sex Bomb versus the Katiyanagi twins, which is like two bands playing at once. I think my favorite set piece in the movie is actually the nightclub fight scene with Mae Whitman as Roxy, because the score by Nigel Godrich is really great, but there's so much going on and it's just a really detailed mix. But I mean, the film is extraordinarily detailed, and so it's great to sort of be able to sort of hear it and see it better than it ever has looked and sounded. It's shocking to me when I watch it that it's like 10 years old, because it seems to me really sort of like quite startling and fresh. And I think sort of like visually, for something that's like a decade old now, there's very little in it that feels dated to me at all. So to see it in this new kind of like version was just like a pleasure, because I just think it looks and sounds better than it ever has done before.
Scott, I forbid you from hitting on Ramona.
Hey, what's up?
Am I dreaming?
The best of like films that I think break new ground with technology are using technology to do something you couldn't do before. I guess Baby Driver was an attempt to do that, to sort of make a movie where the dialogue was less important than what you're kind of like seeing and what you're hearing in terms of a sound and music basis. That was definitely the idea. It was a great experiment to push that as far as it could go. For example, like I said, there's a thing in Last Night in Soho where we go on a journey in the movie, and at a certain point in the movie we start using all of the Dolby Atmos speakers. So you kind of like lull you into a false, kind of sense of security, and then like suddenly like the world gets more immersive. Without giving too much away, there's a moment in Last Night in Soho in the Atmos mix where the Atmos element really kicks in, and we designed it very specifically and when you watch the movie you'll see it and hear it, obviously, because there's a point in the movie where suddenly all speakers are sort of like working. It's like you've already like lent into here, and then suddenly like you're in it. And I think there's lots of things you can do like that, where you can use sound as an immersive experience, but as a storytelling device, for sure. I like the idea, like where you can use, in the same way that you could use a change in visuals to denote something, you can do the same thing with the sound. So, there's lots of tricks that you can do with that. Once you've heard it, you start to think in terms of when you're making your movie of how you could utilize it. So I think that's usually been the case, is it's something where it becomes part of the design of the entire movie from the start, rather than something you just think about in the mix. I'm always like looking for something like new, of like something that comes along saying, okay, this is like sort of somebody is trying to break new ground, and that's always like fascinating to me, and you're always waiting to see what that next movie is that sort of seems to use all of the kind of the capabilities of technology in vision and sound at their disposal to create something new. Like sometimes like kind of going back into remastering something can be a bit of a chore, or like you have to find all the assets and stuff, but in this case it was actually a very sweet reunion. And so I sat in this literal theatre watching the Dolby Cinema version with the editor of the movie and the sound mixer of the movie 10 years later, and watching it, and I had like no notes. It was like such a pleasure because it's such an easy experience, because it's like, well, it sounds and looks better than it ever has done, and what better way to celebrate 10 years of this movie. The film was designed for the big screen and for the best sound systems and stuff, so to be able to kind of see it with the best specs is like, obviously, as any filmmaker's dream. You want people to see it as good as it could possibly be.